Привет, which is Russian for aloha. This is section 2.5, which is properties of numbers. Get through this pretty fast, but things that you do need to know. So the first one is the commutative property of addition. If you want to abbreviate, I underlined it in the red, you can put com prop of add. Okay, what that is saying is a plus b equals b plus a. So you can just move them, you can commute. So if you think of commuting to school or moving. So for example, if I have 3 plus 4, I can also write it as 4 plus 3. It equals to the same, I can switch it. But it will not work for subtraction, because if I put 3 minus 4 equals 4 minus 3, that is not true, because negative 1 is not equal to positive 1. Okay, so the commutative property works with addition but not subtraction. Okay? But the commutative property also works with multiplication. So if I put 3 times 4 equals 4 times 3, that's still true because 12 is equal to 12. Okay, but it doesn't work with division either. In the same way it doesn't work with subtraction, it doesn't work with division. If I put 3 divided by 4 is equal to 4 divided by 3, that is not true because that's 0.75 and that's 1.33, repeating. Okay, so it only works for addition and multiplication. It does not work for subtraction or multiplication. So again, commutative property means you can move it. Okay, you can change the order. You can move them. Commutative. Okay. Associative property of addition. If you do want to abbreviate, please put the C. Okay, don't use the first 4 letters. That's swearing. So put the C in there. Okay, and so it's associative property of addition. What this is saying is associative means like groupings, so like friends. So for example, if I have A plus B plus C is equal to, instead of doing the A plus B first, I could actually group the B with the C first, and it comes out the same. For example, if I have 3 plus 4 plus 5 is equal to 3 plus 4 plus 5. And if you notice, in the commutative, the order changes, but in the associative, it stays the same. The only thing that changes is the grouping. Okay, so in the first case, the 4 is with the 3, and in the second case, the 4 is with the 5. And to prove that it works, if you do the 3 plus 4 first, you get 7 plus 5, and that equals to 12. Whereas if you do the 4 plus 5 first over here, I would get 3 plus 9, which still equals to 12. Okay, and I'll save you time by saying the associative property does not work with subtraction in the same way it didn't work with the commutative. Okay, so associative property of addition. Associative property of multiplication is the same thing. You can see is that B is grouped with A here, and in this case B is grouped with C. So it's just again grouping. So if I said 3 times 4 times 5 is equal to 3 times 4 times 5, and if I wanted to do this one first, I would get 12 times 5, which is equal to 60. And in this case, if I did the 4 times 5 first, I'll get 3 times 20, which is still equal to 60. Okay, so com-prop and associative prop works at addition and multiplication. Okay, addition and multiplication. Those are the first four. The next 4, identity property of addition. Anything plus 0 is equal to itself, and we had this one already. So if I just said simple number, 7 plus 0 is equal to 7. Any number plus 0 is equal to itself. The identity property of multiplication says anything times 1 is equal to itself. So if I had 7 times 1, that's going to equal to itself. Or even if I did like negative 3 plus 0, that's still going to equal to itself, which is negative 3. And even if I did negative 12 times 1, it's still equal to negative 12. The identity did not change. Okay, so in this case, identity prop of addition, you're adding 0. And in this number 6, identity property of you're multiplying by 1. And again, it doesn't change. The identity stays the same. The inverse property of addition is saying a number plus its additive inverse is equal to 0, or the 0 pair. So if I had 3 for A plus the additive inverse would be negative 3, that equals to 0. Okay, or the opposite of it. So if I had negative 6 here, plus the opposite of negative 6 is actually positive 6, and that equals to 0. Okay, so when you add it with its opposite, it equals to 0. The inverse property of multiplication, we had this one. A number times its reciprocal, which is the multiplicative inverse. This was the additive inverse. This is the multiplication or multiplicative inverse, is equal to 1. So you can see in the inverse property of addition, it equals to 0, whereas in the inverse property of multiplication, it equals to 1. So what this is saying is if I had 2, I would multiply it by its inverse, which is 1/2, and that is equal to 1. Or in the same way, if I had -5, the inverse of -5 is going to be -1/5. So again, you keep the sign. And -5 times -1/5 is still +1. Okay, so quick ones, identity property of addition. It stays the same when you add 0. Identity property of mult stays the same when you multiply by 1. Inverse property of addition equals to 0 when you add a number and its opposite. An inverse property of multiplication equals to 1 when you multiply a number times its inverse. Okay. Last 4, and then I'll give you some examples. Symmetric property is just saying A equals B, then B is equal to A. So you can just switch it around. So if you had something like 12 is equal to 3x, you can just rearrange it. If you like to have the variable on the left side, you can just switch it to 3x is equal to 12. Okay, just saying that you can switch it around. The distributive property, we went over this in a previous section. You're just doing your circle and rainbow and you're multiplying. So in the first rainbow, A times B is AB plus and then AC. So if I had, for example, 3 and I had x plus, let's just do 1. When I do this first rainbow, that becomes 3x. Second rainbow is plus 3. Okay, and I'll skip this example with the negative. Same thing you can see, but instead of a plus, it becomes a minus here. Multiplication property of 0, we're going to have this a few more times again. I did this in the last section, but anything times 0 is equal to 0. So if I had 3 times 0 is equals to 0. If I had x times 0, it equals to 0. So even a variable times 0 is going to equal to 0. And the last one is the multiplication property of -1. Any number times -1 becomes a negative of that number. So for example, if I had 6 times -1, that equals to -6. Or in this case, even if I put an n times -1 equals -n. So even with a variable. Okay, that's the 12 properties. Here's some examples of how you would use it. So in this case, if I wanted to combine like terms, the 3x and the 2x, they're not together. So I can actually move this with the sign in front of this by the commutative property. I'm just going to of add. It becomes 3x plus 2x plus 5. And now I can do PEMDAS, or you can use associative property by grouping it, but because they're addition, you can just use PEMDAS, and this just becomes 5x plus 5. Okay, so you can move the 2x next to the 3x by the common prop of add. In this case, 63 plus 70 plus 30. 63 plus 70, some people might not be able to do that so fast, but if I look at these two numbers, you should see that this is equal to a pretty simple number. Or actually, if I took it off, I'm sorry. Did it like this. 70 plus 30, I could drop the 63 down. 70 plus 30 is 100. Okay, so that's by the associative property of addition. I can group the second group first, and then it just becomes 163. So it makes it a little simpler when you can look at that. Okay, in this case, if you wanted to multiply 25 times 33 times 4, you should know right off the bat, you should have memorized 25 times 33 is 825, and then you can times it by 4. Or, if you notice, the 25 times 4 is a pretty simple multiplication. It's like saying 4 quarters. Okay, so I could actually move this by the common prop of multiplication, since they're all multiplying. There's 3 numbers multiplying. And I could go 25 times 4 times 33. And now 25 times 4, if I associate them that way, associative property, becomes 100 times 33. And then 33 times 100 is equal to 3,300. So you could do a problem like that in your head. just by moving it around and multiplying the numbers that make sense, make it easier first. Okay? Something like this. 7 to the fourth power, you should have it memorized. It's 2401, 2401. Minus 8 to the fifth power, which is 32,768. Again, you should have all this memorized by now. Kidding. But that really doesn't matter. Because if you look over here, 120 minus 120 is equal to 0. So anything over here doesn't matter, because according to the zero product property, anything times 0 is 0. So you can save yourself a lot of time by not even multiplying whatever these are and then subtracting it. And then just becomes 0, since 120 minus 120 is 0. The zero product property makes it 0. Okay, that's the property of numbers. Have a wonderful day.